Good afternoon. My name's David Buik. I'm here to interview Jeremy Skillington and David Allmond of Poolbeg Pharma for Vox Markets, and it gives me incredible pleasure as I'm terribly excited about pharmaceuticals and biotechs, and that's something I think it's a wonderful industry, and I think it needs all the support from the investment community imaginable. So first and foremost, hello Jeremy, hello Dave. Good to have you here to talk about Poolbeg Pharma. Firstly, Jeremy, when was the company set up? Who are the directors? And what does the company do within the biopharma market?
Yes, David, very good to meet you, and appreciate this discussion. So Poolbeg Pharma, we were spun out of hVivo, who run human viral challenge studies in London. They're AIM listed as well in London. We spun out in July of 2021 is when we listed on the AIM market. We essentially took their biotech assets and moved them forward, an initial focus on infectious diseases, but we branched out, as we'll talk about today, into an oncology setting, as well as a metabolic disease, obesity setting as well. So very exciting assets in our programs. As for directors, co-founders were Ian O'Connell, our CFO, and Cathal Friel is our executive chairman. And alongside me as CEO, we also have Dr. Brendan Buckley, who has many, many years as a trained physician, but in the industry, in clinical trials, etc. And we have a non-exec director then of Luke O'Neill, who's also our scientific advisory board. So so we have a nice, well-rounded group of individuals with lots of knowledge in the industry. So as I mentioned, we've got a very exciting pipeline. We've got some clinical data that we can speak about today. We've got an exciting management team as well. Dave has recently come on board along with a few other colleagues from a company, Amrit Pharma, that they built up and was sold last year for 1.48 billion. So we're kind of in that stream of building companies, getting them ready for clinical trials, but ultimately looking for revenue generation and exits ultimately.
But before we get into what I call the exciting meat potatoes, which is always the most important thing, we've got to deal with a little bit of admin, I'm afraid. So, Jeremy, can we ask you again about Poolbeg Pharma's ordinary 0.02p shares, which are listed on the London Stock Exchange with a ticker code of POLB.L. It is a market capitalization of about 50 million with about 500 million shares in issue. Shares have done pretty well since August 2023. Well done, because I'm going to ask you about sales in due course. But I see, Cathal, your chairman, and you have bought shares in the company fairly recently. I'm going to take that as a bullish point. Am I deluded or am I right?
No, you're right. You're right. We're bullish is the word. We're excited about the business model. We're excited about the progress that we've made. We can see somewhat down the road where things are going to progress, and just very, very excited. I think we have somewhat of a unique model where we bring programs forward, get clinical data, and then the goal is partnering with that clinical data. But our lead asset, POB-001, has excellent clinical data. We ran a clinical trial last year to test it in an inflammatory setting, and it worked beautifully well. So now we're progressing that into an indication called cytokine release syndrome associated with cancer immunotherapies, which is a big issue. We'll talk about that later on because it's a real driver of the company right now. But we can see the excitement that the industry has for this, what we see as a solution for CRS, which is a major issue. And again, as I say, planning to move that into the clinic to test it in a patient setting relatively soon. So very excited about Poolbeg and our prospects and the pipeline that we've built, and as the company strategy as we grow and move forward. And of course, the team is outstanding as well. So yeah, very bullish, David, is a fair statement.
Good for you. Now, I mean, I'm an outsider looking in, but I always take great comfort when people like you and Cathal, step up to the plate, put your money where your mouth is. Yeah. And I'm also very keen for companies like yours that obviously the management believe in it tremendously, is that you get a decent shareholder register, and it's not just filled up with people like your good self earning great blocks and stuff. We need the liquidity of the company to be taken care of, and no doubt your stockbrokers and advisors will be giving full advice on that, and all steam ahead to get it done. So that's magic. Moving on now, what was it about Poolbeg that made you both join the company? Jeremy at the IPO stage, Dave, you just after Christmas.
Yeah, I'll take it first, Dave. Let's go chronological. But I had my previous experience. I have 21 years in the biotech industry. I'm a scientist by training, PhD level, biochemistry graduate. So very interested in the science behind biotech. You know, when it goes wrong, you have diseases. So lots of experience internationally in US companies, German companies. But my most recent company was a company called Inflazome that it was founded in 2016. We were a private company, raised VC funding to the tune of 55 million, brought it, 2 molecules through into the clinic, and they worked, exceptionally well. And the company was acquired by Roche Pharmaceuticals back in 2020. So it was a very exciting time for me, for the company moving forward. And as we were doing the wind down, let's say the transition over to Roche, I got a call from Cathal Friel. And I'd met him, perhaps once or twice before, not a great level, but he was saying, Jeremy, we've got this new company, Poolbeg Pharma. We're going to spin it out of hVIVO. The focus was on infectious diseases, and we were smack bang in the middle of the pandemic. And I was like, great timing, great opportunity. I was ready to lead, from, again, as I say, stepping away from Inflazome. So it was a, attractive opportunity. And again, Cathal was very clear, we're going straight to the A market. We're going to raise, public money, and, we'll take it forward. So that's coming up to, I think the call from Cathal was probably just under 3 years ago. So we've made tremendous progress in the interim. So, delighted with my decision, delighted with Cathal's phone call. And delighted to move forward, because we really had, I like, this kind of working hard, but kind of having fun in the meantime, insofar as like very exciting business to be in. I think, Dave, you hit the nail on the head. There's a very exciting business to be in, progressing these, assets forward.
Before Dave comes in, I'm saying your infectious smile and your enthusiasm fills me with a great deal of confidence. Dave, enter stage left. Come on, what have you got for us?
Oh, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Jeremy. So, yeah, my career, I'm 30 years now in pharmaceuticals, and I've been blessed, to be honest. I started out in the sales function in big organizations, and actually have now been through some fantastic international experiences in Switzerland, across Europe, Middle East, Africa, global roles, living in the United States, commercializing cancer drugs that were incredibly meaningful for patients worldwide, and then into rare disease where patients often have nothing. And I feel I've added, hopefully a lot of value to the health systems and the patients with rare disease who have no treatment at all. And so in my latter career, frankly, I've gone to smaller and smaller organizations who are in tougher and tougher diseases, where I feel there's a high unmet need and I can make a material impact. And my last role at Amrit, I was there 5 years. I sold Amrit its first drug. I then joined the company and commercialized the drug, and then we did a few transactions and built the company, from sub $5 million of income to 250. And then Chiesi, who's a rare disease company, swooped in and bought the company, 1.48 billion total consideration. That was from a legacy perspective, that is very meaningful to and motivating for me, because it's good for patients, it's good for everyone. And when Carl contacted me saying I'd like to sort of try and do something like that again, that's kind of how I roll now. I like to be in places where I can actually make a meaningful impact, and get important medicines forward into the right hands and ultimately approved and into the patient. And that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
What I love so much about the pair of you is that you seem to be not only deep in experience in the world of medicine and farmers, which is great, but you're also serious business people, which I love. So Dave, my next question, if I may, is over the years, share prices, as you know, in companies involved in biotech and pharma have performed on a high degree of expectation and future earnings. However, at the end of the day, would you agree with me that sales are a prerequisite? And what sort of progress has been made in the past year by Poolbeg?
Yeah, so I agree. I mean, we kind of have, if you like, two arms to the business, as Jeremy alluded to. We have some fantastic assets, and those assets are in the earlier stages, whether they be in the obesity, diabetes, metabolic disease. We'll have readout there in the AI space, in infectious disease, new discovery targets, or in cancer. And the value creation from that set of assets really is in the getting to a proof of concept and getting to partnering, where one can then advance those programs with partners rapidly and generate value for our shareholders. And frankly, as a small company, we need those partners to drive those to the clinic, to the approvals. But we are also inorganically very keen to see if we can get into a commercial stage now with late stage assets or approved assets in rare and orphan diseases. We're kind of already there because POLB 001 is in rare and orphan cancers. But my background latterly has been in rare and orphan disease, and I would like to get to a scenario where we can identify the right assets to bring into the company to generate income and ultimately contribution, either then to reinvest that into our pipeline, but certainly to drive shareholder value. And so we're on a parallel track, and I think that's kind of what we did at Amrit, and I think we can do it again.
Yeah,
I mean, before I ask you a little bit, tell us a bit more about POLB 001, if I've pronounced it or announced it correctly.
Sure.
I'd like to ask you a little bit more about regulation and people like the FDA. Are getting drugs through now that's into the pipeline, are the regulators becoming more, how can I put it, educated? And is the relationship with companies like yours improving all the time? Because the level of frustration that must have been shown over the last 20 years surely is narrowing now, which is great news, isn't it?
Well, actually, I think there's always bumps in the road with these processes, and there's the pandemic created a backlog and so on. But for the most part, the EMA and the FDA are very sophisticated regulatory bodies that do a great job. And I think if you create the right data, the right packages of information that they require to enable them to make good decisions, that they are pretty efficient at sticking to the clock, notwithstanding when unexpected events happen and you get a bit of a logjam. But actually, for the most part, that's been very positive in pursuit of the benefit and managing the risk ultimately for patients with serious unmet needs. So I've had a very positive experience in my career. I would add one thing, which I think has also been incredibly positive, which is years ago when it was realized that there's about 7,000 rare diseases, which constitute around 20% of the patient population. There was no regulation to spur innovation into rare and orphan disease. So the FDA, the EMA, the Japanese regulators, they put in orphan policy, which encouraged market exclusivity if you get to approval, tax breaks, reduced regulatory fees, and so on. That's caused a massive stimulus of research and approval to at least serve some of those patients, which we intend to do more of. And again, from a regulatory standpoint, I think that's been a great success as an example.
Brilliant. And POLB 001, if that's the right way of describing it, tell me a bit about that, please.
Yeah, well, I am super excited about that because when you've been knocking around for a few years, you see opportunities and you can pretty quickly get a sense of whether something is exciting or not. And this is really exciting. So POLB 001 is an orally delivered P38 MAP kinase inhibitor, which is a bit of a mouthful, but effectively it's quite a broad acting anti-inflammatory molecule that's taken orally. And in the old days, these drugs were being looked at in chronic disease, and there were other modalities that stole the march in that setting, which is fine. That's common with drugs. Somebody gets there, and therefore, I always think of these things as where do these drugs actually? Where's the right home to put an asset like this? Where could it bring real value to patients who are undergoing treatment? And we think we've identified that. And so what you'll see in the future, monoclonal antibodies in cancer were explosive in the early years and causing major benefits to patients. What you're seeing now is the explosion or the burgeoning of cancer immunotherapies, so directing the immune system to attack your cancer. And that is the future of cancer care. We see estimates of $100 to $140 billion in these immunotherapies by 2030. However, always as there are challenges to get to the end goal. One of the challenges in delivering these breakthrough therapeutics is a side effect called CRS. It's a cytokine release syndrome, where effectively the immune system's overreacting. A bit like we saw with some of the viral infections in the pandemic. Overreaction of the immune system can lead to serious problems for patients, and it leads to an inefficiency in the health system because the patient gets stuck in hospital. And so POLB 001, we ran an LPS challenge study, phase 1 study, where we artificially created inflammation in a normal volunteer population. And Jeremy alluded to this already. We showed fantastic results that we can dose dependently dampen the immune system overreaction on key cytokines which are causing that, which things like IL-6, IL-8, IL-10, TNF-alpha. And we also showed that we can control temperature, heart rate, and even general markers of inflammation like C-reactive protein. So we are really now ready to go into phase 2. And we've run some analysis. We estimate this asset is entering into a more than $10 billion market opportunity, because the rate of CRS in cancer immunotherapies on average is over 70%. And so as a potential primary prophylaxis, because it's oral, if we can get it into the clinic for clinical proof of concept, and work with partners to accelerate that program, this could be a real enabler to the great promise of the therapeutic expansion I described.
That's fascinating. You recently announced you're increasing your focus on rare and orphan diseases. What does that mean for the company and for the average person in the street, so that they understand?
Yeah. So, well, rare and orphan, by definition, it has different definitions. So in the United States, rare and orphan is less than 200,000 patient population. In Europe, it's a definition of prevalence of 5 per 10,000. Or less than 5 per 10,000 of population. So these are rare conditions. And by definition, they have sometimes no alternative treatment, so hard to diagnose, sometimes no treatment available, so high unmet medical need, a concentrated set of physicians who look after these diseases because they're not so common. And they tend to be genetic. About 80% of them are inherited, and therefore you need long-term therapy. What it means for the company is sort of what we did. If I take the parallel view of Amrit, which I've just been working on for the last 5 or 6 years, it means that we, as a small company, as we identify assets and opportunities where we can bring material value to these rare disease populations, it means that we would be able to move into a commercial stage organization cost effectively. We're a very judicious company in terms of our investment and spend. And with Amrit, as an example, we generated contribution from the first asset within 12 to 18 months. And then we entered into the United States, so it became a global organization with a couple of rare disease assets, and then we brought in a third rare disease asset, and the company now was running at 250 million from almost a standing start. And so what it means for Poolbeg really is, rather than pure early stage stuff, we really want to be in that commercial arena where we can generate contribution and reinvest into the company in the future.
I understand that you're looking for strategic partners. Are they easy to identify in your field, or is the field pretty narrow?
I mean, partners, it goes back to, as David and I kind of mentioned, our time in the industry, 21 years, for myself. I worked on business development side of things, so I've got a tremendous network, so into all of the pharma companies. So it can be tricky. You can't just kind of go blindly and knock on a door. You have to have, there's a process to go through. So the business development teams are very busy, very active. They're, as I say, they're very proactive in sourcing new opportunities. They have a lot of outreach going on, because I think roughly, it depends on the pharma company, but roughly 50 to 60% of a pharma pipeline has been brought in externally, from companies like Poolbeg. So they're very active in that. So we have lots of multiple conversations going on, and we can talk about our CRS trial later on, but there's 2 pharmas in particular are very keen to be involved in that study because, as Dave mentioned, they have these terrific drugs that work in an oncology setting, but they have this issue with CRS that they'd like to get rid of, and we can help them with that. So there's a process, but we're so knowledgeable and experienced in the industry. We can work through that process ourselves. So it's
you've got a nose, but you've got a hell of a lot more as well to know exactly where you're going.
No,
Jeremy, I understand that you're using artificial intelligence to find new drug targets and treatments for flu and RSV.
yeah.
AI in drug development has been growing a lot in the past few years. How much faster is it?
It's a really good question. So I will take a kind of a step back. That we got this terrific data set from, again, colleagues at hVivo when we spun out. And essentially it's like 100 volunteers who you deliberately give them influenza. And they're in a quarantine setting. So you're taking blood samples from all kinds of samples before they get the virus, and then post-virus and on recovery. So you're able to do all this kind of deep analysis of your gene expression profiles and protein expression profiles. So it's 6 gigabytes of data per volunteer. It's a huge amount of data. And for an individual or a team or a lab to sift through that data to come up with targets, it would take years, to sift through that. And that's the beauty of artificial intelligence. So the supercomputers they've built right now, you can take that same data set, feed it in, and get it to kind of read, analyze, look for connections, between them. And we worked with a really, exciting group, Side of Reason, who have these disease models, these AI-built disease models. So ultimately, we're looking for, individual analysis, on an individual analysis basis, like what person, recovers quicker and why, or what person doesn't get infected in the first place and why. So you can, you have a much, much better understanding of the disease. And then from that, you can take, what targets, you can go after, what drugs to go after. But it is transformational in the last several years that applying these various AI technologies and techniques to the biotech industry. It will save a lot of time. I think for us, it saved us years, without question, of coming up with novel targets. So it really is the way of the future. Like, if you need to see that proof of concept. But we were delighted with the collaborations that we had with both Side of Reason and 1-3 in the infectious disease space. But it's the way of the future.
So what you're saying is it's hours rather than weeks or months.
It would be months, though. It would be, for us, I think the 1-3 collaboration took over a year. But as I say, to analyze all that data set, it would take 5-10 times longer than that in a non-AI setting. And again, the 1-3 collaboration was less than a year to come up with identify potential drugs for RSV. So it is. I mean, there's still a process to go through. It's not a magic bullet, but a lot quicker than what it used to. So I think it's it's like drinking water from a fire hose. A lot of data coming at you, and you have to kind of be able to kind of like turn out a tablet to figure it all out. And so we have a much better understanding of the disease now, and a much better understanding of what targets are involved in that disease progression.
Is it an expensive progress, or?
It saves you so much time. I mean, a lot of the work in the past has been in this, wet labs, like in laboratories where you're growing cells and you're testing cells. But the AI, a lot of it is in silico. It takes time. As I said, the data sets are quite large, and it takes a while to sift through all the data set, but primarily in silico. So it's, you're not, and then you do the proof of concept in the laboratory, but it's on a much smaller number of targets. So much more efficient. And I'd say, like, it's, what a time to be alive, to be watching all this kind of emerge and develop. It's fantastic.
Well, it's a pity that I'm, in the twilight zone. So anyway, I hope the people that follow are doing fine. Jeremy, tell me a little bit more about your oral delivery programs. I mean, GLP-1 has been another area of big interest in the last few years, but there's lots of GLP-1 drugs already out there. How's yours different?
Yeah, no, very, very good. I mean, GLP-1s have just exploded. This is a drug that's been, on the market for many, many years in the diabetes space. And it kind of controls your blood glucose. But then people kind of saw opportunities beyond diabetes, including obesity. And there's recent clinical trials that were run where they saw a reduction in weight by 24%. And so it's quite significant. And there's significant health benefits then that come from that. So, but the key thing to make is, like, the GLP-1 agonists that are out there, for the most part, are injectables. So it's this kind of like, every day you're kind of injecting and you're kind of, moving on. So we licensed an oral delivery technology where what it will do is, take your protein, which is very fragile, you can't take it orally, or your stomach acids and enzymes will degrade it. So we encapsulate it so you can take it orally. It gets through the stomach, survives the stomach. And then with a change in pH, it releases the cargo, which is the GLP-1 agonist, and then it'll start working. So we have a clinical trial in preparation to test that hypothesis. And as you mentioned earlier on, from a Poolbeg standpoint, these are very rapid clinical trials. These are, bringing a patient in over, just 2 days, and you're testing the response, and it's just a blood glucose. So if you're seeing a positive response and you're seeing the drug in the system, you've got a drug that works well. So it's kind of switching the world from injectables to oral delivery in a huge market. This is, again, it's over $100 billion market that we can take our program in, and again, ultimately with the clinical data we have this year, we'll partner with the big pharma companies, as Dave mentioned, but they're very excited to see what the data looks like. So, it's a fantastic, and again, I mean, you talk about, kind of drugs. I mean, this will have broad, wide impact on, as I said, those with diabetes, those with, heart disease, those with obesity, those with renal disease. So it has a, wide-ranging impact. So very exciting for us and the patients.
And could it put chemotherapy on the back burner eventually in 10 or 15 years' time?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that's, more on the immuno-oncology side. If it's a fascinating, again, natural history of cancer, in that, back in the 50s, it was chemotherapy to get rid of, your tumor cells, which is a pretty blunt instrument. But right now it's getting very sophisticated. And the cancer immunotherapies that, Dave referred to, I mean, they're very potent. They're kind of, triggering your immune system to go after the tumor, which is a difficult thing to do because it's self, your immune system is trained not to go after self. It's trained to go after, external invaders like bacteria and viruses. So you're training the immune system to go after the tumor. So, so again, you do hope the chemotherapies will be eliminated in time to come, and the side effects. But, that comes with those. But as I say, with the immuno-oncologies, we want to get rid of that CRS side effect as well.
Yeah. Well, finally, gentlemen, why should investors stop and take notice of Poolbeg? That's a very basic question, but it's fundamental.
But I think we talk about since we IPO'd in 2021, we have made terrific progress, in choppy waters. I always describe that, in choppy waters. The markets haven't been very friendly, but we've kind of cut through that. Where we're out the other side, we're still in a very healthy cash position. We have a terrific pipeline. The recent additions of Dave, of John McAvoy, our Chief Legal Officer, of Laura Maher, who's heading up clinical operations. We have a fantastic team behind us now to drive all of those forward. So I think we're maintaining that momentum, but I think it's like the hockey stick approach. We're kind of climbing now. We see great potential, great pipeline, and as Dave mentioned earlier on, bringing other programs in as well, and this kind of dual parallel track strategy. So I think the company, we're in a really terrific pivot point right now to kind of drive all of that forward. So excited what we've done in the past, but we don't rest on our laurels. We're excited to see where the company, where we can bring the company over the next year or two or three. So it's a fantastic time, to be in biotech. I've loved my career in biotech, but with the programs we have right now, as Dave mentioned earlier on, they'll make a real significant impact, and nothing makes me happier.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I've enjoyed it enormously. For listeners, just to remind you, you've been listening to Jeremy Skillington and Dave Allmond of Poolbeg Pharma. And I'm going to be the first to say I wish them Godspeed for the future. It sounds a very, very exciting operation, and I wish you both well.
Thank you so much, David.